Hello and welcome to Movie Buffs, a show where the action is the juice and where we live our lives a quarter mile at a time. I'm your host, Cisco from Misfit Minded. You can follow me on all the socials at Misfit_Minded and my website, MisfitMinded.com.
And I'm Shani B. You can find me on all the socials at It's Me, Shani B.
Each week we take the red pill and use our certain set of skills to break down the best action films of all time. Today we're talking, of course, about the 99 action film, The Matrix.
Human beings are a disease, and we are the cure.
Now,
So you're here to save the world.
everything you know about reality,
So what do you need?
Guns. Lots of guns.
everything you believe about the future,
Buckle your seatbelt, Dorothy, because Kansas is going bye-bye.
will be a thing of the past.
No one can be told what the Matrix is.
Whoa.
You have to see it for yourself.
The Matrix.
Yes. If you haven't seen it, what are you doing with your life, first of all?
Come on.
But secondly, it's about a computer hacker who joins forces with rebel warriors to battle a malevolent cyber intelligence. And to get this bullet train started, let's take everyone back to March 31st, 1999, when this film hit theaters. I was not old enough to see it in theaters, just to put that out
Nor
there.
I.
But later on in life, I would. So I'll talk about. But this movie made $63 million and has since grossed a total of almost $468 million, making it the fourth highest grossing Warner Brothers movie of all time. And as a whole, the franchise has made over $3 billion. So a success, in other words.
You could say that.
And before we get into the nitty gritty of, because we're just covering the first Matrix film, which got here in 4K, the White Rabbit on the cover.
Ooh, let's go.
Before we get into that, last Wednesday actually is perfect timing. So it's the 25th anniversary. But Warner Brothers announced they have a fifth Matrix film in development, directed by Drew Goddard. So not any of the Wachowski sisters, although Lena Wachowski is producing still. So I'm just curious, like, when you heard this news, like, what was your first reaction?
Well, I love a good Matrix. I feel like I have mixed reactions to the continuation of IP nowadays. But I do like Drew Goddard because I was a fan of Cabin in the Woods. He hasn't done a lot. He mostly produces.
Right.
But I did like the Cabin in the Woods a lot. And I thought that the reboot situation was like pretty good. It wasn't perfect. There were some pieces I would have done differently per se if I was wearing my studio executive hat, but I'm still interested in it. I still think there's something there. And especially rewatching it, I was like, I do want something more out of this. So I think I'm interested. At the very least, I'm gonna check it out. What about you?
Same. I also was not a huge Fanny B of the last one, Matrix Resurrections. Um, and I do think it's like it kind of tried to address like the reboot culture, which I like that they tried to go for that. I just didn't think they really hit, in a way that was for me.
Nailed
And
it.
and the action was definitely lacking. I had to say that. So yeah, I'm excited because like Drew Goddard, like you said, Cabin in the Woods and Bad Times at the El Royale, both movies I like.
Yes.
Both movies with play with genre really well. So I do think, like, just again, putting on our producer hat, if we have this guy, this director in mind, I think they're probably thinking, okay, he has a really strong hold of genre,
Mm-hmm.
and he hasn't done sci-fi yet, but hopefully he can put that same like set of skills to use, because I feel like we'll talk about it. That is one thing you really need to have a strong tone with this Matrix franchise, and it's hard to get. I mean, we've seen so many knockoffs that tried to copy the Matrix after this that
Mm-hmm.
tried and failed to do that. Uh,
Sure did.
so, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is. A franchise this successful, there's going to be sequels, there's going to be reboots. I've played the video games. Those are great. So they're always going to be expanding it. That's just the culture that we're in, unfortunately. But for us fans, that means there could be a good one. So you never know.
That's right. That's right.
All right, so let's get into it. Without further ado, our first segment is called "Getting the Band Back Together."
I don't have friends. I got family.
That's right. In this segment, we take a slow motion look at the filmmaking choices that went into the film and the ass kickers responsible. This movie was written and directed by the Wachowskis, Lana and Lily. I think there was a little controversy about like this story and everything. I know there's like some OG lore which really tracks for like this film, but
I think that was proven to be false.
I was gonna
Uh,
say, I feel
yeah.
like this movie so clearly looks like something they would do because, like if you've seen Bound, you understand the way they're moving the camera, the like pop of color they want to use. And so I feel like I like this movie because for a sci-fi movie, it still really stands out like an auteur, with the eye of an auteur. What do you think about the filmmaking? What's your vibe on this?
Yeah, just to that point though, like from what I remember, it was like one lady who was like, "You stole my story," and it
She
was
couldn't really prove it.
yes. It's like I don't know. There's a lot that they're doing in this script, like which I think is one of the strengths, for going into that. Like this script has so much in it that like could have been a disaster, especially like they're not first time directors. I love Bound, like you said.
Yes,
That one is
so
such
good.
a great movie. But never in a million years that I think those people who made that would go on to make The Matrix, and like this script is just like, it's so massive. There's religion, there's philosophy, technology, it's a trans allegory, and
Mm-hmm.
somehow it works amazing. Like I
Yes.
have no idea. Like that's the biggest magic trick to me that they sincerely like pulled this off, and it worked. So yeah, there's like all these. I love all the references to like other pop culture stuff. Like Tarantino was already doing that, but I just think the ones that they chose were like perfect. Follow the White Rabbit. Let me take you down the rabbit hole, see how far it goes. You're not going to Kansas anymore. Like
Yep.
um all those references to like simulation and stuff like that. Like all these conversations they're having in 99, like before I was even old enough to understand a lot of these, like are still being talked about today. So I just think
Yes,
it's
the
like
Y2K vibe
it's
is
such
so
a
good.
smart script that like again you could I just watched it, like it just nothing has aged really for me. What about you?
I mean, I agree. I feel like the only thing that has aged roughly would be the CG, and that's just because that's going to be how the CG is going to go. But there is such a unique vision here, like how I feel about a hue of color. Sometimes if it's blue, I'm like out right away. But
I was gonna ask, what did you think?
it,
What did you think?
perfect green here. I feel like
Yes.
it's not distracting. It just really does set the tone of this idea of like there's something there that you can see if you look closely, and that is this green hue, and the Matrix is green. And I also really struggle with shadows, but this one again does such a good job of utilizing shadow
Well,
in
yeah,
a
because
way
like
where
Bound is like a noir, and I was and
yes.
like you said, like I think they are incorporating some of that stuff with the lighting too, like to your point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like to all of those allegories and everything like that too, there is a shadow world they're operating within. There are things hiding in plain sight, but in shadow in some way. And I
Mhm.
do feel like the filmmaking really matches the storytelling. And to your point about the script, it's incredibly tight. Like the
Yeah.
first few lines that are spoken to him are telling him what's going to happen, and that's like what you're supposed to do. Screenwriting 101.
Yeah. Wake
Perfect.
up, Neo.
Perfect.
Wake up, Neo.
That's right. Yeah, you're my own personal savior, my own Jesus Christ, straight
Yeah,
up.
when you rewatch it, knowing everything, there's so many like hints that they drop at the beginning. Like there's something about flying too. I remember, and like
Mhm.
like Jesus Christ, like you said, there's so much you can take from this movie, which I think is a strength. I also had the green hue down. I don't mind it as much as you personally. Like we talked about that with
Payback.
Payback, yeah. Like, I like that, personally, depending on how it's used, you know what I mean? It
Totally.
has to make sense, like, there definitely can go wrong in the wrong hands, but, like you, I think this is perfect use of it. I didn't wear this green shirt on purpose, but I think it works perfect, actually.
Yep.
Just, from the Warner Brothers logo, I love when they do that, like, they incorporate that, so it's you see the green and, like, the code, like, the green code and everything like that, and there's a reason behind it, you know what I mean? It's not just like, oh, we just want to make our film look different. It's like, no, the Matrix is our reality, quote unquote,
Yep.
but slightly altered. And so like how do
Yes.
we represent that visually so people know that this is a simulation? rather than
Mhm.
reality. You just make it a little bit green here and
Yeah,
there.
a
You
little
know
hue here.
what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah, so deliberate. So many choices, right? They're doing film in reflection. They're using elements of deja vu, but they're creating that in the film. Like everything is so thought out. The detail-oriented filmmaking thinking in this is like what gets me so jazzed every time I revisit it.
Yeah, like that, and even that like deja vu moment with the cat is like a Schrodinger's cat, reference. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like there's
Yes.
so much. Keanu when
Perfect.
he opens the book at the beginning, is reading about simulation. Like there's all these little details. And Chad Stahelski, who worked on this with Keanu as a stunt double,
Yep.
would go on to direct John Wick, and so that entered my mind too. That like all of those films, like again, we mentioned this later. If the Oscars really respected action movies, John Wick 4 would have been nominated for cinematography because that's one of the
Yes.
best looking, not action movies I've seen in a very long time. Like that movie is
Mhm.
just so stylish and perfect. And all of those movies have their own distinct style and look to them, with the color and lighting and stuff like that. So I think you can kind of see that DNA. Not just because Keanu is John Wick, but because the same filmmakers were taking notes during this whole process. Like this is something that's going to be around. Like they're revolutionized how action movies feel and look and should be.
Yes, agreed. I totally agree. I think that, the only stuff that is a little funky is some of the CG, but there are some moments where they're just seamlessly tying the CG in that at the same time I'm like, it's still really deliberate. It's not like that someone was like, "Oh, look at this cool thing I can do with the computer." And they were like, "Oh, put it in." They were like, "I'm trying to create something that I just can't do practically, so I'm going to need to utilize this effect." And I feel like it holds up because it's thoughtful. Whether or not it like looks pristine is neither here nor there, in
Well, we
my
talked
opinion.
about Roadhouse, right? Like that they were
Yes.
trying a new technology, and whenever that happens, you have to look at it from that perspective. And you say that, but like I think this CGI is 100 times better than the sequel, which like straight up look like video
Oh,
video game characters. You know what I mean?
yes.
So like
Yeah.
when I watch it, I really because we'll talk about more like the bullet time technology was very new. Like they were the first big budget movie to ever use it.
Yep.
It was from a commercial. I remember I think was like the first time it was like a Budweiser commercial or something. That was the you
It's
can look it
awesome.
up. You can look it up. Was like the first instance of it, and they took it and used it in an action lens. And I think because of the camera work and the choreography, it still holds up for me. Like I don't it does
Totally.
never takes me out. Like some of the movies around this time that try to use C like I mean Spawn was around this time. Like that CG looks
Yes.
fucking horrible. Like
Yes.
I'm not getting the
Exactly.
4K of Spawn anytime soon because that probably looks terrible.
Yeah, it's definitely not worth it. But yeah, I think like one shot that always sticks out to me is when they're floating in the white room and then they drop down into all of the weaponry and everything is just there. It feels so real even though it's OG CG. It still looks and feels real because it's so connected to the story. And
Yeah.
I agree. I feel like the rest of the franchise maybe gets a little too into the ability to use the CG and they kind of abandon the where tying those things together were, but man, that is perfect in this one, I
Because
think.
he's not like a superhero, yet. Like
Exactly.
there's
Yeah,
still some groundedness where he has to grow into the one, you know what I mean? Which
exactly.
I think helps it too in that respect.
For sure.
Some of the other cinematography things I liked were like, some of the dual focus shots I thought were really
Yes.
cool. You can see the blue and the red pill through the shades. That
Yep.
shot is amazing. And just the way they shoot action in general, I just think is like so fast, so quick. You can see the actors are really doing it. Like I
Mhm.
didn't rewatch it, but there is a like literally like feature length documentary or something if you have the DVD or Blu-ray where
Mhm.
it's like the filmmaking of it. Like they train the actors for months and months before this movie was made, so they would
Yep.
have all of the choreography down, and it pays off because you can
It
see
really
them
does.
actually doing it. They're not, stunt doubles are used here and there for some of the more, wire work and things like
Right.
that. But like when it comes to those close-ups of the hand to hand with Lawrence Fishburne and Keanu and Carrie Ann Moss and they're fucking kicking ass, like
Hugo
it's
even.
great. Hugo,
Mhm.
yeah, they're
Yes.
great.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Which actually perfectly brings us to our next segment called Choose Your Fighter.
Welcome to the party, pal.
This is where we take a look at all the bros and babes that flex their acting muscles and sometimes their real muscles for us movie buffs. So the film stars, like I said, Keanu Reeves, Lawrence Fishburne, Carrie-Anne Moss, Hugo Weaving, and the great Joey Pants.
Of course,
Um,
Joey Pants is here. He was from he was in
Bound.
Bound.
He's
Yep.
excellent. He's so good in Bound too. If you haven't seen Bound, like
Ugh,
that is, I would put that on the same level as Matrix. It is that good. Like it is such a great movie.
it's
I
true. For
re-
them to have two films that are distinctly different but still could totally represent them as filmmakers is really fantastic.
and there's some phone suspense in that one too,
There sure is. There sure
which
is.
is good. So but yeah, what performances really stood out to you that you like?
Well, of course, the big three, those main, the main holy trinity, if you will. But also, I think Agent Smith is so good. Like Hugo
Yeah,
Weaving, every time I revisit this, I'm always like, damn, he is so good. He's so interesting. And he's such a perfect
Mr.
mirror.
Anderson.
Yes, he's such a perfect mirror because, like I also recently saw The First Omen, so I've been thinking a lot about those biblical allegories and everything. And
How was
just
it?
like there's
Just quick.
it was dope. It
Okay,
was
that's
so
what I've
good.
been
It was
hearing.
so good. Yeah, I really, really I was like ready to not care about it at all, and I left being like, damn, that was like pretty good.
I mean,
So
you do an Omen prequel, you're asking for, a tough
some eyes.
audience. Yeah.
But yeah, like that idea of like him sort of serving as the perfect false prophet to Neo as a prophet. It was such an amazing thing. And I just feel like his stunt work is so good. He brings a kind of such an interesting human element to technology. And I feel like if I'm ever going to believe that AI is really going to turn on humans, it's going to have to be like humans to do this. And
Mhm.
there's something about how even he knows he's been infected by the way humans do things and he hates it. It's so, so good.
I
He always
think
gives me chills.
Yeah, I think that's what I like about his performance the most is like you can just feel like his disgust, his utter disgust of humans. He doesn't want to be here doing this. Like, he is like a lot of movies during this time, had like jobs were the worst, and like we were just stuck in this like rut, like thinking about like our lives and our, our
Mm-hmm.
mortality and things like that. So he is like one of those characters, but he definitely brings like an extra layer to it of just like disdain for his job, why he has to be like, I don't want to do this. Like he's straight up that monologue he tells, when he's with Morpheus alone, it's just like your stench. I hate this. I just want to be out of here. I don't want to be doing this anymore. But you humans keep on spreading like a virus. Like, and then, that goes really good with his first like interrogation scene with Keanu too. With Neo, I think is like kind of the same thing too. But yeah, all of his lines, it's just like he's eating like Mr. Anders every time. So,
Such a good actor.
and his last name Smith is like the most generic. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
business. They're all in business suits and the glad like they look like CIA agents. Like it's just such a perfect blend of everything that makes those villains work.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And even Joey Pants as like the, villain that he is too. He's
yeah.
so good. I always am so
He
angry
is
with him when
such a
I
good
watch
villain.
this.
He is a
He is
great
such a
villain.
good villain. Yeah, yeah, just totally despicable and you're just like, "No, fuck." And there's nothing you can do. You just have to watch it sort of unfold as it goes, which is really good. But everyone is good. This is another great example
Yeah,
of
it's
how
really
perfectly cast everyone is.
yes. And there's just a lot of like interesting like and I'm sure you've heard like Will Smith was supposed to be Neo and he turned it down.
Would have
Because
been wild.
would have been a different movie for sure.
Yes.
I think it worked out for everybody though. It's one of those, you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
um and I think Keanu is like the perfect Neo. He has that kind of like, clueless stoner bro persona, whether or not like that is really him or not. You know what I mean? It was just like this is Bill and Ted. This is a guy who doesn't know what's going on. You know what I mean? Who's just like in his own
Yes.
head. And so I think like that's what made him the perfect Neo because he's constantly the whole movie like questioning everything and like he's out of the loop and people
Yep.
are having to like teach him. So I really think he makes it work because of himself, his own.
Yes, well,
Yeah.
he's so authentic because, like his name is Thomas Anderson, so obviously he's modeled after
Yep.
the biblical doubting Thomas. And, Thomas needed to be shown the holes in Christ's hands to believe that they existed. And I think that's the interesting thing about what Keanu can do is like he can really act one way and then be shown something and truly portray discovery for us. That's like
Mhm.
why I think even though he plays, someone so silly in Bill and Ted, like he still has so much more depth than people
Yeah.
are ready for. And I think that's what's also so thrilling about when he finally is going to embrace the character as as he's supposed to within the story. He's just, man, he's one of the best of all time. And I feel like yeah, he gets teased or whatever, but it's perfect. He is the perfect
Again,
Neo.
you need that sincerity though to make this kind of thing. You can't have that like winking, like so many movies today are afraid to be as sincere as this. And I love that this movie is like we are gonna be, up our own ass about religion and all this stuff, but it's
That's right.
it's also gonna look great and have these actors selling the shit out of it.
And he can't be the kind of guy that like believes he's better than everyone else.
Yeah,
Because that's something I also found to be really interesting this time revisiting it is like when he's getting in trouble at work and the boss is like, you think you're special, that you don't have to
yeah,
follow the rules. He's not like looking angrily back. He's not like, yeah, I am special. Fuck you. Fuck authority. You know what I mean? Like that isn't who he is. And there's something about how like that's makes this character and the story even better. Because if he was a person who was like, that's right, I'm burning it all down, it wouldn't be as compelling. But the fact that he's like, no, I'm not trying to say I'm special. I'm just like unhappy.
yeah. Which
Like
is like
I'm just
this
unhappy.
is like a clear line from Office Space to this. I think Office Space is also 1999. You know what I mean? And like
Yes.
the boss who
Yep.
has that same drawl, Mr. Anderson,
TPS
yeah,
reports.
yeah, like all that
Yes.
stuff. Like it's very similar. And I like Joey Pants the villain in this. He's the villain in Bound 2, and Memento. There's
Mm.
questionable if he's a villain or not, which I love too. Um,
Carrie Ann's in Memento
and
also.
Carrie Ann Moss too. Yeah, how can you forget? But I like him too as a villain because every time I watch this movie, I'm like, I really can't. He did kill people. That was the thing that irredeemable. But like
Yes.
his main point of like, I'm taking the blue pill, man. Like this, you call this a good life? Like
Yeah, you
this,
call this freedom?
yeah. I'm like, I'm sick of eating goop. I want a good steak. I want to smoke cigars and drink wine, and like, I don't care if it's not real. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people can relate to that. Like
Yes.
they're in their phones or playing games, or you know what I mean. They all have their own vice to get away from reality.
That's
Um,
right.
so I think he's an understandable villain, as well. I'll say.
Yes, he's very relatable, because I do think that's like part of, the interesting piece of this is the where my kind of problems come in and like where the franchise I feel like loses me is in this space where like there's no such thing as a world without structure, as a world without a hierarchy that you're serving. You just maybe get a little bit more choice in it. But like where is the line between the choice of like actually enjoying your personal life, and that's the weird thing about The Matrix is that like it's your own personal story. They have programmed a personal story for
Right.
you, and it doesn't have to be you are the main character in that story. And so he's an interesting reminder, I think, of exactly what you're saying, but also of like all of us wanting to be the main character in the story. And when Neo comes around, it's sort of like you're the farthest thing away from the main
Yeah, and
character, man. It's this
there's
guy.
like the hint that he likes Trinity. There's some jealousy there, but
Hmm.
like, yeah, when he's delivering those lines like on top of them, like as they're laying in there, I'm like, oh, this guy is like, oof, like
Maniacal.
so creepy and yeah, maniacal. Um, but yeah, just it's understandable like why you would feel that way,
Yes.
not want to eat goop all day. Um,
Yes. Fair.
so
And
I
you want to be rich. They can program you to be
Yeah,
rich, which
like
is
he's
pretty
like, I want to be
nice.
an actor, someone important.
Someone important.
And then I love Mr. Smith's like, okay, Mr. Reagan.
Yes, so good,
A line
so
I
good.
probably missed like so many times, but now it just made me laugh so hard. Uh,
Again, deliberate, like
yeah.
so perfectly deliberate.
And then yeah, Carrie Ann Moss, honestly, like I put here, every time I watch this movie, she's like becomes my favorite. I feel like she's so fucking good. Like she's the first person we see in the Matrix, you know what I mean? She really brings us
Mhm,
into the world.
mhm.
And like you said, like with similar to Keanu, like she has to be kind of stoic and like hold her shit together, even though she has all this knowledge from like the Oracle and Morpheus and things like that. But like her performance, you can see that there's like this level of vulnerability that like she is feeling something for Neo,
Yes.
And
Yes.
there's some fear there, from what the Oracle told her and all this other stuff, and there's some fear that Neo's maybe not really the one, like
Mhm.
they're again, it's like the idea of faith, you know what I mean? Like you
Yes.
don't know for sure if he's the one or not. You
Yes.
have to go on faith. And so I think her and Fishburne is perfect too, like with, those cool ass shades that probably no one else on earth could pull off.
And the most
Uh
amazing duster that he's just, like, totally
yeah.
sweeping through halls with.
Yeah, I mean, like, and they bring him back for John Wick, which I love too, like which we talked about.
Mhm.
And he's great in that too. But you need for that part too, you need someone equally that you can trust and that doesn't feel that okay, should we trust this guy? He's selling us a lot of stuff, like I don't know, maybe his version of reality is the real or is the fake simulation or something like that. But because it's Lawrence Fishburne, and he is delivering it in such a way where he's like, "Look, man, I know this is a
Yep.
lot. You know what I mean? Rest up. Like
Mhm.
take as much time as you need. Like there is that kind of time at the beginning to where like there's between the action to kind of sell that.
Well, it's basically like he has to perfectly embody, the religious figure you would follow to believe you were great enough. And he has to be able to have human charisma in order to get you to believe, which I think is unique to like what Lawrence Fishburne brings to this character. But again, also the writing, because the writing, if delivered in the wrong way, it is a little too preachy. It is a little too maybe
Yeah,
even commanding. But in a way, what he does is he asks Neo to be inspired by him rather than follow him. And that's why the three of them make such a good trinity, because like Trinity herself is truly the spirit of freedom. The idea of like she can make a choice about what she's going to do. She has power in this world equal to the men, and she can choose to fight for what she believes in as well. And that's really what everybody is fighting for in this story.
yeah, I love that when like when Neo is like deciding to save Morpheus, and he goes in and he's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "I'm going in with you." He's like, "No, you're not." And she's like, "Oh, I'm not. I'm the commander of this ship."
That's right.
Like
That's right.
you believe that you can save Morpheus. I believe that you need help. Like she had that whole
Hmm.
speech. I love that how she breaks it down.
So good. Epic.
She's great in this
Truly.
movie. So yeah, I think that brings us to our next segment, called Need for Speed.
Pain don't hurt.
This is when we do what the Oscars don't do and honor the stuntmen and women for their amazing death-defying work and pick out the punch that knocked us out the most. All right, what are the top 3 stunts you got?
This is a toughie. This is a toughie for this movie for sure. So
Mm-hmm.
many iconic set pieces. I had to mention like the train fight at the like, and there's just so many packed into each sequence. So I'm just putting in like the sequence because I
Yes.
can't even like. So the train fight at the end. I mean, you could put like, Neo kicking Agent Smith, like, and then when they're like in that the train place and Neo does the backflip, to
So good.
so good. I also had the kung fu training with Morpheus, which is amazing. When you first see like what you can do, like, and that also has one of the best lines where he's like, "I just learned kung fu." Uh,
Yes. Yes.
some great lines in this movie. I think though number one, I have to give. It might be the most basic answer, but I have to give respect for the bullet time. Like, I couldn't single out just one. I mean, obviously, there's like the one on the rooftop where he's dodging. Does the famous,
Yeah, the famous move.
yeah, often parodied, that he does to avoid the bullets. I could do like the Trinity one at the beginning where she like flies up in the air, does like the crane kick, and then like fly like runs on the wall. So um, yeah, I think bullet time. I just have to put bullet time. It's what this movie is known for. So I feel like there's kind of an obligation here that as far as stunts go, you have to put respect on that.
They build so much around it, so I
Yeah.
totally agree. Yeah, it definitely means a lot, and I agree with you. The training sequence, the kung fu training sequence, is so cool because it's another reminder of like to just believe in yourself. You're not really breathing air, you're not really sweating.
Yeah.
Believing that you have to be a human in this situation is what's actually holding you back,
Yeah,
which I
Morpheus,
think
do
is
you
really
really
fun.
think I'm faster than you and stronger than you?
Yeah, yeah. Do you think strength has anything to do with it?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
good. So,
yeah.
so good. I really like when they're sliding down the wall when they're like kind of trying to escape after, Joey Pants has sold them out
Hmm.
and they like slide through and you can see
Oh,
all
like
the
yeah,
the
when they
wall like
hide.
exploding as they're coming down.
Yeah,
Love that. And then I think for me the like most iconic sequence is when they're going to go rescue Morpheus and there's just
yeah,
debris flying everywhere cuz so many guns are going and bullets falling and slow-mo flips and wall walking. It's like the culmination of everything they've showed us up until now and it's such a good culmination, giving you everything and being like, it was truly all leading to this rescue.
yeah. And I think, like, to be fair, like that is probably my favorite action sequence of the whole movie. Like, so I specified it down to stunt, but that whole sequence is like full of stunts too. Like that's why we're saying it's so hard to like
Yeah.
pinpoint.
But like all that shit flying all over the place, I wonder how many squibs they put in the walls of those,
Oh my
those
god,
columns that are
just
exploding. Because I
destroyed it.
think exactly, and they're just flipping over, and they don't look, affected whatsoever, which I also think is like
Well,
what
there's
makes
like
that
I
sequence
like the
so cool.
dust. Like that's what really
Yes.
sells it is like all the dust flying from it that gets on their like coats,
Yep.
and that you can see like or when they're like fighting and like rolling around in it, and you can see their face like start to get like powdery and dusty.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that oh man, that sequence is so great. Like walking through the metal detector, being like, "Sir, if you have any metallic items, full full
Yeah.
arsenal."
So good. Yep. Just like playing it cool and, treating reality with a grain of salt. But then obviously in this sequence, we can see so much reality is they're using so much practical effects to sell all of this. So I do feel like the stunts of like using explosive squibs while people are also on wires and
Mm,
then getting the camera to go fast and slow paced, just
yeah.
again that deliberateness within the stunt sequences is what makes the stunt so thrilling to watch.
Yeah, my dad had a figure of Keanu doing the somersault and shooting at the same time with a pillar behind him, like one of the broken pillars behind him when
Sick.
I was growing up. And
That is awesome.
my last thing of the sequence is like when in the video game they've pretty much just like rebuilt that whole, hall, and you can like do bullet time and, kill agents in the like recreate it was the best.
That's what you want. That's all you want.
Enter the
Yes.
Matrix, classic game.
Yes. Exactly. Everybody should go. All right. That brings us to our next segment, Death Proof.
If he dies, he dies.
This is where we take a look at the movie's body count and see who bit the dust the hardest. Shani B, who did?
Well, I have a couple moments here that are
Candidates?
important.
Couple corpses?
A couple corpses, that's right. I think something I love just across the story is how when you kill any of the Smiths, they just transform into like whatever poor
Yes.
person was being used
Yeah.
at the time, which I think is really, really cool. I do think that like Joey Pants getting his is so rewarding because you're really not sure he's going to, which I think is like a hard thing to
Well,
pull
again,
off.
they set that up so perfectly where, just the maniacalness of it, and then where he's like, if you're the one, then I'm not gonna be able to pull this out. And
It's gonna
then
take some kind of miracle.
yeah, and then frequently throughout the movie, like they do like this yes no kind of punch line, and so he's like, there's yes, and then Joey Pants no, and the guy
Yep.
shoots the gun, and so they do that a couple times. I noticed this time around. So again, they executed perfectly. It's not
Yeah.
just the scene; it's the filmmaking too that like really makes those scenes work.
Exactly. And I think that's why my favorite kill ultimately ends up being when Neo, jumps inside of Smith and just like tears him apart from the
Yes,
inside. It's like a CG kind of thing, but it looks so cool and it's just such an
you see all
effective
those
death.
like little bumps like going on his hand, and it's like.
Yes. And like, his performance of it is so amazing.
And there's these little beats like that they do, the Wachowskis, where like so at the end of that scene, you see a little puzzle piece of Agent Smith's like mouth, like
Yes.
like they didn't have to do that, but like again, they know there's like, and the same thing with that sequence in that skyscraper, like when they're in the elevator, they go up, you hear the ding, and then the last piece from the pillar like falls down, and it's like these people know comedy too. Like
That's right.
they know how to keep it like somewhat light, even though all these like people are getting killed. It doesn't feel that way because
Right.
we know that they're just ones and zeros
At the end of
code.
the day.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Exactly.
That's how they got away with it, I guess.
Yeah. What about you? What kills what are the ones that really stick with you?
I like the Joey Pants one too. That was definitely on there. Just because at a certain point, he just deserved it, and the way too that he like flies up in the air like with that beam.
Yep.
I think that was so cool. But ultimately, I feel like Trinity had like some of the best kills. Again, I just really love Trinity in this movie. Um, One I said was in that skyscraper sequence where I guess it's Trinity and Neo like simultaneously, but like she kicks a shotgun from a guy and then it falls into her hands and she shoots him in the back with it. And then right
Yes.
after that, Neo somersaults, picks up a gun on the way down, shoots somebody, and then goes behind a pillar. Like just using the like
The
crazy
flow.
acrobatic stuff to kill people, I thought was really cool. And my number one, I have to do, on the rooftop. Trinity gets one guy in the face with a knife, and then Neo straight up, Trinity, help! And she comes through with a dodge this.
Pop.
Fucking amazing moment. I love
Yes.
it.
So
So
good.
great. Any other thoughts that you had of the movie? Have some time here.
I mean, just I feel like this movie is it's so easy to love this movie,
Yeah.
honestly. Like everything is so pristine. There's nothing really wasted per se, and I do feel like that's what is memorable to me about it. Is it like well, the whole time I was watching it, I was watching it with my partner, and I just kept like quoting it right before someone
Yes,
said what they were
I
gonna
do the
say
same
because I
thing.
was like, I know this movie so well, I love
Yeah.
it so much. But I do feel like it's one of those movies where I wish that like hopefully you'll teach it to your students in a screenwriting class or
Oh,
something
that would be
because it
great.
needs to be that pristine. Like even each of the deaths we're talking about here, they're not there just for the sake of death. They're there to like remind you, especially in those moments where Trinity and Neo are working together, that like human beings are more powerful when they work together, and the whole point of the Matrix is to isolate them, to keep
Mm,
them in separate pods where they're not truly interacting with each
yeah.
other in a meaningful way. And so I do feel like even that is mirrored in like this culminating scene when
Yeah.
they go,
Yeah, I was gonna say too, like with the we didn't mention the pod scene, but like so horrific. Like like I think
wild looking.
they did a really good job of like depicting a future that like you would not want to live in. Like we're all just batteries basically. There's some like
Yeah.
religious stuff there too with like rebirth. There he has no hair, like a baby, a fresh baby. Coming
Mm-hmm.
out of the pod, and then like literally dropped in a vat of water, like kind of
Yep.
like baptized, and then like as he's going up in the Christ pose, I'm like, it's
Yep.
like this is not reaching here. Like there is a lot of stuff that they're putting in here. But yeah, just it's realistic, that like when I forgot that it was like they say straight up AI, that
Yeah.
is the reason. And it's
Yep.
like that how many conversations happening right now about how AI is going to lead to the destruction of our society.
Exactly.
Like they
Yes.
really had something here.
Oh, and that goo stuff, the sequence of the goo is so good. Like when he wakes up in it, he's covered and he like pushes out of the sort of like placental sac or
Yeah, it's kind of
whatever.
like the fluid like that babies have, like
Yes,
where they
yes.
they
Oh,
come out. It's
exactly. And then when they like are telling the story of how it all goes and they have like the little fake baby in there being like, being loaded up into the matrix and like filling the goo all around it and you're just like, "What? How did they
I
get
know.
here?" And these like weird sentient things are just like straight up, grabbing the bodies as batteries is a wild thing to think of too. Like
Yeah,
what an extreme but
the
cool
shot with the
idea.
baby getting the fluid is
Yep.
like
Oh my
horrifying.
gosh. Yep.
The like the little holes that you have in your body that like he just
Mhm.
has now.
Yep.
I
Yeah, when they have to give him all the acupuncture because he's atrophied from, like, not really using his
Yeah.
body.
It's like I feel like the first half is like the most sci-fi stuff. Like that's all straight up like horror. Even like my like yeah, verging on horror a little bit with some of that imagery there. Um and
Truly.
and the last thing I just want to mention is just like the sound design. I feel like it's like next to like Star Wars, I put it up there because like they're just perfect. Like, the dial-up sound whenever they're going into the Matrix. I mean, like the
Hmm.
shot where they go through his throat and down, like, and you hear that sound.
Yep.
Whenever they're being plugged and unplugged, I love the sound there too. And there's
Oh
just the
yeah.
sound of the Sentinels. Is kind of like they're machines, but they have this kind of like termite like
Yeah, they're kind of
sound.
living.
Yeah, which I think is great too. So I just think they did a really good job selling that too, to where none of that stuff feels dated either. Like it
Nope.
feels really great. I mean, maybe the cell phones are, but I like that that's like their way to get back is you have to answer the phone, like it.
Yes.
And it's, we all understand it. It's nothing like too out there. And add some suspense to where they're like racing towards the phone, most of the time to
Yeah.
answer it. So, yeah, all that stuff I think really cool. Let's see, and let's talk. Let me see where we at. Takes us to our next segment called Exit Wounds.
Come on, don't bullshit me.
This is where we talk about some of the film's imperfections and decide whether or not they are fatal hits or just minor flesh wounds. Do you have any plot holes here? You got any questions?
I really don't. I feel like this is one of those movies to where like, you can point out like the only thing I really had was like they really skimped on the security at the, the skyscraper where Morpheus was. It was
Yeah.
like one level of dudes, like I guess, like
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like it's just asking for trouble because it's like the Matrix, it's not real, like maybe they didn't they have that one line in there where no one has ever fought them. So they had no reason to believe that they
Yeah,
were
that
going
they
to
could be
come
beaten.
and rescue them. So but yeah, it's like anything you try and point out in the Matrix like that doesn't look right. It's like, well, it's not real. So
Yeah, so that's totally fine.
so it's not reality. So why are we nitpicking it when it's not? So I don't know. What about you?
I don't really have many either. Mostly just that when they go to rescue Morpheus, they fire so many bullets into
Yeah,
the room where Morpheus is, which is
that is
like
true.
pretty risky because I'm not sure how they can tell the difference. But it's really cool looking, and they need to kill everybody in the room, which is, I
Yeah.
think, a tall order. But that's another
The way
great
it's
like
filmed too is
sequence.
like in slow mo. You get like the bullets raining down out of the sky from it's with the rain because it's also
Yep,
raining in the building because of the
that's right.
fire alarm.
Yep.
So great.
Yeah, and just I also love that moment of like the whole reason why they're able to get up there without the more important, most sentient Mr. Smith finding out is because he takes his earpiece out. I
Oh
feel like
yeah.
that's such an
Mhm.
interesting thing where like for a moment he unplugs from
Yep.
his own matrix to have this
And they're
conversation with
like, he doesn't
Morpheus.
know.
Yeah, yeah. What are you doing in here? So good, so good. And also, I guess I always wondered why the Oracle, like how the Oracle hides in the Matrix. I know she can like see things happening,
Yeah.
but like people are coming over to her spot all the time. So like how, I
Maybe
guess
that's
some
why
of
though,
that
because she
stuff.
has that like predilection that like, to
Yeah, maybe
anticipate
she
where
can.
people are going to be at, and so let me move to a different spot. I don't know. Maybe they explain in the sequels. It gets so
I can't
convoluted
quite
that I
remember. Yeah.
don't remember. But I know the Oracle appears in the sequels too, like
Yes.
in each movie. So
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I remember rewatch like before the newer one came out, number 4. I did go back and watch the other two
I did
because
the
I don't
same.
know them as well
Yeah,
as this first one. And I do remember there being a complete story. It was pretty big. So
yeah.
I'm curious to see if like when they do this fifth one, are they doing a new kind of trilogy? Are they retroactively gonna take things from the original 3 and make them mean something in a new storyline? Like I guess I'm most curious about what it means to continue the franchise at this point, if that makes sense.
I think they
Um,
should go because I did. I had in my collection. They made like an anime anthology. It's called the Animatrix.
right.
Um, and it's not perfect. Some of the animations like they're all different animation styles. So some of them I'm not
Okay.
too crazy about, but like I think a lot of the ideas in there are like cool and all original and all take place, in and around the Matrix or in like the real world version of our future. And they actually go back and like kind of explain more to what happened
Okay.
because they say we don't have a perfect explanation of what happened. This is just what we think happened. So I mean,
Right.
there's so much lore that you can kind of fill in, I guess, is what I would say, like, would be like the best way to go about it, or just take another story, but don't just try and retrofit stuff into the
Yeah, please
original. I
don't.
think that would be the biggest mistake they could make.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. All right. Okay. That brings us to our last segment, which is called Game Over, man.
Get to the chopper!
Yeah, this is our final segment where we'll rate the film out of 5 red pills. Shani B, what are you giving this?
I'm a notorious high grader, but I don't know that I can ever give any movie a 5 yet. So I'm just going to go 4 on it because the tiny little things are keeping it from being the most perfect, but it is so close to perfect. It really is. Such a good story, such a good vision. And yeah, I love revisiting it. So I want to give it 5, but I'm going to give it 4. What about you?
I'm shocked that I'm higher this time. I am, but
Get out!
I have to give it a 5. I mean, just for, like I
Yes.
said, the influence it has on action. So many, like, the next wave of like that wire fu is because of this movie, and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. But like, we have to respect that it made Keanu an action, like a bona fide action star. It's my favorite type of movie where you can rewatch it, and not just for the action scene, but it also can make you think about bigger themes, that
Yes.
like a lot of action movies just don't have time for, or just don't care to put in it. So for that reason, I'll always rewatch this. And this is like, if someone was like, what's one of your go-to action movies or whatever that you would recommend, like, this would be in that list.
There it is.
And then I saw it in theaters when they re-released it, I think for when the new one came out. So
Yes.
whenever, how many years ago that was, but and it held up great there too. Like, all those, fist pump moments really were still holding up in the theater. So
Yes.
so
Awesome.
yeah,
Good, good. Yeah, it deserves high marks regardless. This is such a good movie. I'm so glad we did it.
yeah,
I'm so glad that it'll have an anniversary every 5 and 10 years to be revisited.
yeah. It's one of the greats, I think. So all right, I think that wraps it up for us. Let's remind the people where they can find us.
Yeah, get your fix and follow the show at We Stay Buff on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and on Twitch at The Buffs. And you can follow me at It's Me, Shani B on all the socials.
Take us for a ride and subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please leave a positive review. 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. Also, let us know what you think of it. What would you rate it? And if you're excited about
Mm-hmm.
the sequel, love to know what you guys think about that. Follow me on all the socials at misfit_minded, and my website at misfitminded.com. Thanks again for listening to another edition of Movie Buffs, and be sure to join us next week when we cover the film Ex Machina for its 10th anniversary. But until then,
Stay
stay
buff.
buff.
Yes.